Hey, what's going on today, guys? It's Trey. Welcome back to the channel. As always, welcome back to sunny, beautiful Germany. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the two questions that I get asked the most about life right here in Germany. And those two questions are, how much do we pay a month for housing, and how are we able to find a place to live? So without further ado, stay tuned. Let's get into it. Now, before we get too deep into the video, I think it's very important for me to mention that we do live here in Stuttgart, which is the 6th largest city here in Germany. Obviously, it's not gonna be as expensive as Hamburg or Munich or Frankfurt, but it is still a very expensive place to live. And it's one of the more expensive places in all of Europe to live. So keep in mind, wherever you live in Germany, it's gonna be different from where we are. It might be cheaper, it might be more expensive, but obviously a lot of the costs that are going to be factored in is very dependent upon where you're going to be living. So I thought that would be something that was very important to mention. I just want to make sure that I'm as clear as possible. We live here in Stuttgart. And another thing I wanted to mention is, obviously, if you couldn't tell by the accent, we are American. So the last state that we lived in the US was Hawaii. Hawaii has just been designated as the most expensive state in the US. So I also thought that that was something very important to mention. I'm gonna talk more about Hawaii as we go throughout the video, but I also wanted to mention that because it's a lot cheaper here versus Hawaii. But we'll get more into that a little bit later. Now, the number one question that I get asked the most is, how much do we pay for rent? And so I want to talk about that first. So right now we pay 1,670 euros a month. And with that 1,670 euros, that includes 4 rooms, 2 baths, a balcony, a covered garage, and most utilities. The only utilities that aren't covered are electric and cable. So when we first got here to Germany, I'm gonna be honest, we didn't do as much research as we should have. But two very important things that you should consider when moving here to Germany is there are actually 2 different types of rent. There is something called warm rent and something called cold rent. Cold rent is essentially moving into a property where no utilities are included. You're basically gonna be paying for everything on your own. You have to go out, you have to find electricity, you have to find cable, you have to find heat, you have to find gas, you have to pay for everything on your own. Warm rent, on the other hand, everything is essentially included, or at least I'd say probably 75% of the utilities are included. So that's very different from things in the US. In the US, it's just basically utilities included or utilities not included. There's no warm rent designation, there's no cold rent designation. That's pretty much just what it is. With your utilities here in Germany, you pay a flat monthly rate. And so at the end of the year, if you happen to use less than the flat rate or whatever that designated fee is, you may actually get money back. You will actually get money back from the utility companies. If you use over that rate, you have to pay out of pocket for whatever that amount of electricity or whatever that service that you utilize was. You will have to pay out of pocket for that amount. So very different from things in the US. And I'm not gonna lie, we were a little bit shocked by that when we first moved here. I will say though, utilities here in Germany have actually been a lot cheaper than they were when we were in the US, right? And so a lot of things come into play with that. Here in Germany, they don't really utilize air conditioning. That right there is a huge savings. And also I've noticed that a lot of people don't use lighting in their house as much throughout the day, right? So it's just, there's a very different mindset when it comes to utility usage in Germany versus the US, but you're gonna notice that your lifestyle is gonna change a lot when you move here to Germany, and it's actually gonna help save you a little bit of money as well in the long run. Something else that's very important to mention is when you're actually looking at a listing or looking at a home that you want to live in, coming from the US, the designation of a house is very different than it is here in Germany. So for example, in the US, if you're looking for a home that is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, that place is literally 3 bedrooms. Those are 3 rooms that you can sleep in or use for whatever space that you need. And then there's 2 separate bathrooms. Here in Germany, on the other hand, and here in most of Europe, on the other hand, that same place would be considered a 4-room house. So they actually include the living room as a room here in Germany. So very different. So just keep that in mind too when you're looking for a place. Just always remember to add a room. I know that was very difficult for me when we first moved here, but I promise you, if you just remember to add a room to whatever place that you're looking at, that is how many sleeping rooms or office spaces that you'll be able to use in your property. Now, once you end up finding a place, the number one piece of information that you will have to provide either the homeowner that you're renting from, the property management company that you're renting from, the number one thing that you're gonna have to provide is proof of income. And now, I watched a documentary recently on housing in New York, and I think they were saying that you had to prove that you made 3 times the monthly rent. Now, is that the case here in Germany? Yes. Was that something that we were told was the case when we moved here? No. So I think that that's a little bit dependent on who the property management company is or who you're deciding to rent from. But I know that that's something that's very important to mention because there's a lot of people right now in the US that are kind of shit out of luck right now, right? Because, you know, for example, let's say if you live in New York City, you find a nice place that's $3,000 a month, right, in Manhattan. That means you have to show proof that you make 3 times that amount. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that we paid 3 months in advance before we moved into our property. Now that is very different from things in the US, because typically in the US, you pay first month's rent and a security deposit. And depending on the state that you live in, you might have to pay first month, last month, and security deposit, or some places, you might not even have to pay a security deposit, depending on the company, depending on the city, depending on who you're deciding to rent from. Sometimes they just take your word for it and just let you move in and hey, rent's due 1st to 3rd every month. So like, that was very different. And so you will need to factor that in. You gotta have at least 3 months saved up in order to move into the place. Now, is that the case everywhere? I don't think so. But I think in larger cities, like I said, we live here in Stuttgart, but in larger cities, I do think that is the case. So just keep that in mind as well. Now, for a lot of you guys that heard that 1,670 euro price tag, that might come as sticker shock for a lot of you. But keep in mind, 1,670 euros for essentially a 4-room house is an outstanding deal, especially for us. Like I mentioned, we just moved from Hawaii. Hawaii, you will never ever, at least here in Germany, you won't really encounter any pricing of that magnitude. And I just want to tell you how much we were paying in Hawaii. We lived in a few different places, but one place in particular was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. That place we paid $3,000 a month. Now, don't get me wrong, it was beautiful, it was stunning. I loved it. It was a farm space. Like we had a huge driveway to utilize. You know, we worked out on the farm. We did a lot of great things. It was amazing, but it was $3,000 a month, right? For a 1-1. Probably will never do that again. Another place that we lived was Honolulu, which is obviously the largest city in Hawaii. There we had a very large, let's just call it a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, but it was a huge attic space where it used to be a nightclub. It was like a historical venue, but the guy let us rent it out. He was a really nice guy, amazing guy. There we paid $2,200, but that was essentially still a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. The best overall deal that we've ever had for a place in Hawaii was actually $2,500 a month, and that was in a place called Mililani Mauka, center of the island, not really close to any of the beaches, but there, $2,500 a month, and that was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Loved the place, included parking, included 2 parking spots. I love that place. It was amazing, but still very expensive in the grand scheme of things. Now let's move over to a city like Los Angeles, which is another place that I lived. When I lived in LA, I paid $2,000 a month for a studio in Burbank, which is not in Los Angeles per se, it's in the San Fernando Valley. Still very, very expensive in the grand scheme of things. When we lived in South Florida, we were paying $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. That was probably the nicest place that we've lived overall. Like thinking back on all the places that my wife and I have lived, I would say that was probably like the best bang for your buck. It had like a pool, it had a sauna, it had parking. It actually had two spots. It had a nice garage. Like, yeah, that was probably the nicest place that we've ever lived, but still 2,000. And I can guarantee you present day, that place is probably like 2,700 a month, factoring in inflation and all these different changes in the world. So when you factor everything in, you know, even with the electricity costs, we're still saving around like $800 a month. So, you know, for us coming to Germany, we saved a ton. Like, I can't say that enough. And, you know, specifically if you're coming from areas in the US like the San Francisco Bay Area or the Los Angeles metropolitan area or the New York metropolitan area, or even, South Florida, Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, you're gonna save a ton of money moving here to Germany, big time. Now, I will tell you that this same exact place here, if you were to move it to Hamburg or Frankfurt or Munich, for example, I can guarantee you that it's most likely gonna be about 800 euros to 1,000 euros more a month, just based off of those cities alone. Just having the name Hamburg in your address, or Munich or Frankfurt, having those names in your address, that, just start forking out the cash, because you're gonna pay a lot of money to live in those cities specifically. So that's gonna be it for question number 1 about how much we pay for rent and how much you can expect to pay. So it's gonna be all over the place. I will say that this was the best deal that I saw when we were searching for a place, right? So we happened to take a tour of a place that was in Stuttgart, Mitte, really nice. It unfortunately didn't have an elevator, so that was a deal breaker for us. And plus it was street parking only. The place ended up being cheaper, but just like factoring everything in, this was still the better deal overall, especially since we got 2 extra rooms, a garage, and like this place is just really, really nice. Now let's move on to question number 2. How were we able to find a place? What resources did we use? What did it take for us to find a place here in Germany? So finding a place was a huge challenge, but I promise if you use these 3 resources, you will be able to find a place. It might take a little bit of time, but I guarantee you'll be able to find a place that you love. So the very first resource I want to talk about is eBay Kleinanzeigen. I'm just going to be calling it eBay for the rest of the video. So a lot of people are probably wondering, like, eBay trade, that's kind of odd. Like that's a resource where you buy and sell things, right? Well, no, you can also buy cars on there. You can buy boats. You can also take advantage of housing as well. So it was a great, great resource for us. It is definitely the most legitimate resource to use, right? You don't have to worry about being scammed. You don't have to like send your email to some robot that's going to respond to you, and then another robot's going to respond to you. There's none of that at all. It's cut and dry. It's all direct person-to-person contact. And I personally love that, because obviously, like, when you're searching for a place, time is of the essence, right? Because places go quick, especially here in Stuttgart with the bases around here and, all these large companies here. Places go very quick. So like, time is precious. I want to speak to the person directly. Like, I want to explain to them who we are and where we're coming from. And I want this place. I want to take a tour of this place. I don't want to, be put into some email list to be receiving, contact. Look, that's just a waste of time. I don't want to have to deal with that. And probably the number 1 perk of eBay is it is free. You heard that right. Free. A lot of these companies nowadays are starting to charge people to utilize their housing searches. And I just think that's absurd. I totally understand like realtor fees and like you can pay a realtor to find you a place. I totally get that. But if I'm doing the search myself, why do I have to pay to contact a company? Why is this company making me pay to speak to them about a property? I just personally think that's absurd. Granted, if you work for a real estate company, like, I don't hate you, I promise you, but just that whole mindset and ideology just doesn't make too much sense to me if I'm doing all the legwork myself. Now, the number 2 resource that I want to talk to you guys about is Emo Scout 24. Now, Emo Scout 24 is an incredible resource. One, because they have a very large and extensive catalog of different properties in and around the areas that you're searching. So for example, what I mean by that is if you happen to be looking directly in Stuttgart, it will also show you some properties around the area as well that might be a little bit less, but have the same offerings that you desire, and sometimes more offerings than what you're looking for. You can use it to your advantage. It has some great filter options in there. Like, you can find a place that already has a kitchen, you can find a place that has bathtubs, you can find a place that has balconies, that has garages, that's close to schools. There's a ton of great perks of using Emo Scout. Now, the thing that I don't like about Emo Scout, unfortunately, it's probably the one resource that I just felt like had the most scams on it. I felt like my time was wasted a lot by using Emo Scout, and that's because, I'd click on a great property and like I'd be looking through the advertisement and I would see no point of contact at all. And so it's like, now I'm having to see, well, who is this real estate company? And then I'd have to, go look up their information online, and then I'd be calling them and I'd say, hey, is this property available? And then they'd have to go and search for the property. It took way too much time, and you guys already know time is valuable to me. And so I hated that aspect of Emo Scout. Now, I will say that we actually found our property that we live in now on Emo Scout, but I'm telling you, please be patient, because Emo Scout, it's gonna be a rarity to find a property where the landlord or the homeowner has their contact information listed. It's really annoying. I don't know why that is. You know, if you're trying to rent a place, why would you want a potential homeowner to have to be like jumping through so many hoops just to see your property? Like, I know for me, if I was selling a house, I try to make it as easy as possible for people to reach out to me, to be able to reach me, right? I don't want to be missing out on opportunities, but I just feel like a lot of these larger companies that utilize Emo Scout to sell their properties, they don't care about that, right? They want you to jump through those hoops. They want to try to find the right qualified candidates and to be able to, list all these different things. I personally don't like that. I'm sure some of you guys might love that so much, but I'm not that guy. So that's why Emo Scout, unfortunately for me, was the worst resource to use, even though we actually found our place with it. The final resource I want to talk about is one that we all know too well, and that, believe it or not, is Facebook Marketplace. Facebook Marketplace, I would say, is like a middle of the road resource to use. Sure, there's some scammers out there. Sure, there's some illegitimate people looking to take advantage of people. But for the most part, I really didn't encounter that too much, and we saw some great properties on Facebook Marketplace. So the really nice thing about Facebook Marketplace too is when you message a property owner, you're actually messaging somebody's Facebook. So I know this might sound kind of weird for some people, but I like to go to a person's profile and make sure that they're legitimate, right? If I'm just seeing that their profile was created a few days ago or like a week or two ago, 9 times out of 10, that's probably a scam. And so if I can see that somebody has been on Facebook for a couple of years or a year or two, and like they're posting stuff and like actually showing that they're a real person, then I trust that person, right? And so I'd say probably 9 times out of 10, the places that I did see on Facebook Marketplace, they were legitimate, which was really nice. Another great thing about Facebook Marketplace is most people have a Facebook, so it's really accessible. You obviously don't have to set up an account if you already have one. You don't have to like download a Facebook Marketplace app. You can just use your Facebook profile to find a property. And I just think that that is such an amazing thing. I know Facebook is an extremely controversial company these days, but Marketplace is a resource that I have been using for years, and I vouch for it 110%. And look, if you're one of those people that just doesn't like apps or doesn't like to use the internet, obviously you can always use the old trusty method of just driving around town or driving around the city that you live in. And you can literally go walk down the street and see different listings that are listed in windows and listed on at real estate companies. You can do that. I see that all the time. Every time that we're in Stuttgart Mint, I always see rent available, need tenants. I see that all the time. You can do that, and I promise you'll have probably even more success than a lot of the resources that I use, but you will have to obviously put in more work, because now you're gonna have to walk around the city, you're gonna have to learn the language. There's a lot of different things that you're gonna have to do that are a little bit more difficult. Not gonna lie, this thing for me, I run my entire business on this phone. Like, all of my photo and video editing is done on this phone. I do everything on this phone. Like, I do billing on this phone. So this for me is the #1 method. But for you guys out there that don't care about technology, which more power to you, I hope to become that type of person one day. Please utilize your ability to be able to walk around and find a place to live. And so guys, that's really gonna do it for me. I know I threw a lot of information at you guys, but please, if you have any more questions for me, please hit the comment section below. I love Germany. This is an amazing place to live. And chances are, if you're coming from a larger city in the US, like I mentioned, Los Angeles, Miami, New York City, Chicago, Seattle, even Houston, Texas is starting to get expensive. Austin, Texas is starting to get expensive. If you're coming from any of those larger cities, moving to Germany for the most part is going to be a relief. Unless, like I said, you're moving to Hamburg or Munich, which is another city that's extremely expensive, and even Frankfurt is a very expensive city as well. It will still be a great relief to live here. So I hope this video gives you guys a little bit of peace of mind. I hope I was able to hit on everything and educate you guys about housing here in Germany. It is extremely different than it is in the US, and I hope I was able to help provide you guys with some value. I know Obviously, like, we have a ton of US military bases here in the Stuttgart area. This is an area where a lot of people want to be. So figure out where you want to be, you know, try to find a city where there are a lot of job opportunities, and also try to find a city that means something to you, right? So let's use Haley Alexis, for example. She is a great YouTuber that is based out of Munich, right? So when she got to Munich, she was able to grow and flourish in Munich because that was a city that she was able to identify with. I always will tell people, before you decide to uproot yourself and move to a place, try to explore a city first. Take a trip somewhere, take a trip to Hamburg, to Berlin, to Munich, to right here in Stuttgart. Do that. And obviously, if you can't do that, that's fine as well. I'll tell you, the very first time that we came to Stuttgart was when we moved here, right? The only thing that I knew about Stuttgart was that Porsche was here and that Mercedes-Benz was here. That's all I knew about Stuttgart. But ever since moving here, us in Stuttgart are like this. I love it here. This is an amazing city. We got extremely lucky finding this place, which in my opinion is a great deal. And we're just really, really, really excited to be here. It's such a great place in Germany, and such a great place geographically speaking, because we've got France, it's only about an hour and a half away. You know, we've got the Swiss border that's only about an hour and a half away. We're literally like 30 minutes from the Black Forest. Frankfurt is an hour-long train ride. Munich is a 2-hour drive. Like, this is a place where like we want it to be. And so, as I always say, do your research. But if you're one of those people that just likes to uproot yourself, more power to you, and I wish you the best of luck, because sometimes those are the best moves that you can make. So as always, thank you guys for the continued love and support. Use that comment section below to discuss, to talk about housing here in Germany. And obviously, you know, there's, you know, the war in Ukraine that's affecting a lot of things here in Germany. Like, a lot of people are starting to get notices about utility usage and about limiting utility usage. And even in, you know, places like Stuttgart Mid, you're noticing that they're starting to turn off lights in the evening time. And like a lot of the Christmas markets and events that are coming up, they're gonna be using less electricity. And so, you know, I'm very interested to see where things go with the war that's happening right now in Ukraine. But I still think 110%, this is the place that you want to be in Europe, in my opinion. There's a ton of different great countries out there, but for those of you that are looking to live in a great country outside of the US, I will always say that Germany is an outstanding place to live. So please smash that like button. Please feel free to subscribe. We talk about all different types of things on this channel. We eat all different types of things on this channel. And most importantly, I love the communication that I'm able to have with you guys. So thank you guys for the continued love and support. Thank you. Mahalo for watching.